Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, about to be joined by Ken Weeb from the Winnipeg Free Press. Together, we are Kenny and Renny. This is the Kenny and Renny post-game show after another great game by the Winnipeg Jets. You know what? I want to recall something from last season and the season before that. Remember when people would hop in the chat room and they'd ask, are the Winnipeg Jets elite? And I think what I landed on anyway, I don't know about everybody else out there, was if you have to ask the question, the team's probably not elite. I mean, elite basically means you're the best of the best. And if you're asking that question, it probably suggests that there's a debate about it. There's not a debate about people or teams being elite. It's a team that comes out and just basically shows it, right? No one needs to ask that question right now. No one needs to ask about the Winnipeg Jets and are they elite and are they this or are they that? And the Winnipeg Jets just go out night after night after night and show it. And I want to talk about this game, and I'm going to start out and people are going to sound like, I'm being pessimistic, Renny. I didn't look at this and think this was one of the Winnipeg Jets' better games. I didn't look at it and think like, oh, they were really on this night. And it's funny because, a lot of people were talking about the way that they kind of stole all hope in this game, and they did. And the way that they kind of ground and gave the Pittsburgh Penguins nothing, and they did. And my point is, at what it looked like 66% to me for the Winnipeg Jets, they absolutely handled the Pittsburgh Penguins on this night. And I think it's important to point out that it's 66% because that's a good thing. It's a good thing that you're able to do that as a team and go out and not, have to throw everything that you have on the ice every single night. It's a good thing because if you do that, you're going to tire yourself out. You're going to burn out. There's just you cannot continue doing that for an entire season. So if you're able to have games like this and not throw everything that you have at it and still come away with a convincing win, it's a good thing to do. How do you do that? Well, you fall back into your structure, right? The Winnipeg Jets on this night just walked in and took a look at the Pittsburgh Penguins and said, we are better than this team. And the only way they have a chance is if we play down to their level. If they want to go out and they want to play a wide open game, and, watching some of Pittsburgh's players, especially getting Malkin on this night, that's what they want. They just want this to be wide open. They want to play, river gambler hockey and all those kind of things. The Winnipeg Jets wouldn't do that. So they fall into their structure and they give about 66% within that structure. And that's enough. That is a good thing because the Winnipeg Jets, what do elite teams do? They walk in. This is a marker in my mind of an elite team. You want to know why elite teams win so much more often than other teams? It's because they don't walk in here and say, okay, you want to play, we'll take the night off. We'll take the night off from our system and from trying really hard. No, they said, we're going to take the night off from trying really hard, but we're not taking the night off from our system. And we know that our system and us playing our system does not give the Pittsburgh Penguins, as they are right now, as this iteration of them is, as how they play the game, they cannot beat the Winnipeg Jets if the Winnipeg Jets play that system the way they did. So the Jets relax into a system that still requires work, that still requires commitment, that still requires doing the right thing over and over and over again. They just didn't do it at the blazing speed that we saw them do it against the Florida Panthers because they didn't need to. So what I see from the Winnipeg Jets on this night is a team that has found a way to find rest in a season without finding it in a night where they're giving away points. They get to go out and they still get to get points. They still get to maintain their spot in the standings. They still get to do all those things, but they don't have to blow their brains out going as hard as they possibly can night in after night out. That is maturity. And I just, it comes down to, again, the details. I know I've harped on the details this year. I was going to just bring up two really quick details that I saw tonight that just tell me about this team, and they just understand. There's a link to the details and knowing what they mean, right? Why am I doing this? It's because of this specific thing. So At the very end of the game, if you go back and see as the clock winds down, 59 minutes and 57, 58, 59 seconds, final buzzer, the Winnipeg Jets are cycling the puck. They're not grabbing the puck and holding it against the boards and looking up at the clock and killing it. They're doing the next thing that they're supposed to do in their system. And then the horn just happens to blow. So they're not thinking, hey, you want to know how you get in trouble in a game? It's 35 seconds left on the clock, and you're thinking, we just got to kill that 35 seconds. And you're so focused in on that. And then you tighten up, and then you make decisions that you wouldn't typically because you're just trying to kill the clock rather than doing the right things. Go watch that play and how the Winnipeg Jets play that the final 15 seconds of that game. They're playing it exactly how they're supposed to play their system. Nothing changes. And then there's one other one. I think it was in the first period or the second period. There's a chance shorthanded that Florida gets. Brian Rust comes in and he shoots the puck, and then he takes a loop around the net, and then he makes a beeline to the Pittsburgh Penguins bench, and Kyle Connor's got the puck, right? And usually what'll happen a lot of times in those situations is when the pressure isn't there, the team with the puck will set up, right? Okay, I'm going to wait for this defenseman to come back and that defenseman to come back, and they're going to do the loop, and then we're going to do the thing where we drop it back, and then we go and try and gain the zone. Kyle Connor in that moment realizes that what you don't see on camera as well as you see Rust is burning to the bench to try and change. But another one of the Pittsburgh Penguins players is changing at that time. So there's only two Pittsburgh Penguins on the ice at that time. And Kyle Connor is on the other side away from the bench. Okay. Now, what you are doing when you typically set up, which so many teams would do, is you're loading up and you are getting ready to make a zone entry. And that's why you get Josh Morrissey to come behind you and loop behind you, or maybe Mark Scheifele or Kyle Connor loops behind you to go get this zone entry. Kyle Connor realizes in that moment the most important thing to do right now is get the zone entry. So most hockey players get the puck and their brain goes into, okay, we got to set up. What are we setting up for? Well, we're setting up to get the zone entry. Kyle Connor realizes that with the two guys off the ice, they can't stop him from getting a zone entry. So he absolutely gets on his horse with the puck, burns down the ice, gets over the blue line, and then stops and then calms down at that moment. But it's just a brilliant realization in that moment of a player who is not a robot. He's not doing, whatever he's told to do out there to set up the system. He knows the system exists to get the zone entry, and he sees a free zone entry there. So he runs down and he takes it. I know a lot of people are going to think, oh yeah, that's obvious. It's not obvious. And almost nobody does it. And all of you who are out there who play hockey, I don't think you've ever done it in your lives in a situation like that. I know I haven't. Dollars to Donuts, Ken never did. This is just an absolutely brilliant understanding of the game, of the details of your game, and what you are trying to achieve with the details. These are just two little plays that I'm looking at. In the end, they amount to just a couple of the things that the Jets did well in this game on top of a mountain of good things that they did. But to summarize, what I saw was a Winnipeg Jets team that didn't have to be at the very top of their game tonight and found a way not to be, and yet still convincingly win this game. This, to me, is the Winnipeg Jets going out and conserving energy, which puts them in a great spot for tomorrow when they come to where I am now and play the Nashville Predators. They didn't have to blow their brains out to win this game against Pittsburgh. I see a team that's going to walk out of that fairly well rested and in a good place to perform again tomorrow. And it's the details, and it's an understanding of their system, and it's them just on another level compared to a team like the Pittsburgh Penguins. You want to be described as elite? Here's how you do it. You realize that you have a level of your game that teams like Pittsburgh Penguins just cannot reach, and you do what you need to do to reach that level. So you're basically, You're holding the candy over the little kid who can't jump high enough to get it. That's what this game was to me tonight. And I think it's brilliant. I think it just sets the Jets up for future success. I think it shows a mature team who knows exactly what it takes to win. And I think it pays off tomorrow night. I'm getting on the record and I'm saying that right now. That's my take on the whole thing. Time to bring in the man with the best music in the business for his take. Here comes Kenny, folks. Kenny, both you and I have fallen flat on our face as far as being Vittorio Rossi men on this night. So I'm going to use this space right now to tease the suit that I'm going to be busting out for the first time on a national broadcast tomorrow. It is a Frankie special. It's a little bit like Southern Gentleman, I have to say. Now, I'm in the South. I'm not a gentleman. But I'm going to look like one, and I will look like one because I went to Frankie and the boys of Vittorio Rossi, who know how to make a little bit of a clod like myself look like a gentleman. And they could do that for all you clods out there as well. So you know what to do. Head on over to Cordon Avenue, drop in at Vittorio Rossi, loudly proclaim Kenny and Renny sent you. Ask for Frankie and the boys, and they will do you upright. Kenny, what'd you see in that game tonight?
Yeah, I certainly know where you're coming from. I would say that the Jets were a little better early on, and this game could have got out of control pretty handily were it not for a couple of ridiculous saves by Tristan Jarry. But there was definitely, I would say, a little bit of a cruise control element to it, which I think is what you were getting at. But not at the expense of the structure. And I think that that's the thing that was very impressive to me. We know the Jets fell behind 2-0 in the first meeting against the Penguins, and then were able to battle back and win that game. Today, they took advantage of an early turnover and then sort of left no doubt. But at the same time, power play goal happens, and all of a sudden it's tighter than it was needing to be, but it never was really in doubt or out of control for the Jets. But I like their start, and not just because they scored early. I thought they really took it to the Penguins in that first period. And again, I think that there were opportunities to extend the lead, and but again, maybe that would have led to more of a cruise control game. But what we've seen from the Jets so far, Sean, is they're so stifling when it comes to their defensive zone structure and checking in all three zones, right? That's what we'd heard Scott Arniel hammer that point home basically since training camp. So for me, I'm impressed, like you were, by the Jets game overall. This was a game that they really did a nice job on a lot of fronts. 5-on-5, they really gave up very little, and to me, that's what has allowed them to continue to attack. It's one of the reasons why they're 17-3. I mean, their high danger chances at 5-on-5, according to Natural Stat Trick, 13-5, and that's sort of the kind of game that it was. The Penguins seemed to be stuck on the perimeter for the majority of it, and the Jets had no trouble getting to the hard areas, but also defended the hard areas incredibly well. So. Yeah, I mean, the door was left open on a couple of occasions, kind of unlucky penalty on Iafallo where, Shea is falling down already. Again, but folks, this is not a criticism on the refs. In real time, of course you think that they was tripping. We get the chance at the replay, right? That's another one of those great examples where the replay happens, and then you kind of, if you've worn stripes at any point of your life, you're like, ooh, that's one where you're like, man, that was not what actually happened. But at the same time, that's life. And then, Cole Perfetti gets another offensive zone minor, and all of a sudden, oh, wow, if that one-timer hits the net, all of a sudden it's a one-goal game. But it wasn't because the Jets had gone into shutdown mode in terms of like gearing down to save some energy for Saturday night. It's that they were still very good structurally. So lots of good in that one. Again, where there are some areas they could improve, of course, but to me, the overriding feeling I'm left with, and we'll get into it a little bit later, but someone who covered Sidney Crosby 20 years ago in Grand Forks, and all of the lead up to it, that happened in Winnipeg, and a couple of memorable practices in Gimli. To me, it's again, I don't know that feeling sorry is not the right word, but Sidney Crosby kind of deserves better, is kind of what I'm left with from that game and seeing the two meetings. But what I'm also left with is a thought of, what could it mean? I can't wait to see Sidney Crosby play for Team Canada, because he's going to be playing with a level of player that he's not seeing outside of the shifts that he takes with Evgeny Malkin these days, Sean, right? So as someone who has starred for Canada dating back to 2004, 2005, and even the year before that when they got the silver medal on the crazy play flurry off the shoulder of Coburn, I can't wait to see Sid play for Canada, though I feel like he's going to have a very frustrating season with the Pittsburgh Penguins. But that's neither here nor there. And, again, what if Sidney Crosby's playing on a line with Mark Scheifele? That's what I come out of this game thinking, Sean. I think in my head, I'm like, wow, based on how Scheifele has played, and I don't think today was his best game, but it wasn't bad by any stretch, just wasn't as elite as it was the other night. But in my head, I'm thinking, man, especially, Velarde taking all those draws, in my mind, I'm thinking, what if Sidney Crosby and Mark Scheifele somehow play in a line, whether that's with Marchand or any number of other options that are available to him. But anyways, we'll step back from the buffet and we'll dig in a little further. But impressive to see the Jets here at 17-3 at the 20 game mark. Both of you and I both had them squarely and fairly easily into the playoffs, but this is certainly beyond anything that I think either one of us would have envisioned in terms of the start, even though they've been fast starters various times in the last 5 years, but never a start of this magnitude, that's for sure.
Well, in fairness, no one would ever expect any team to have a start like this. Like this is just like uncharted territory that they keep going in here. But it's interesting because we've been saying this since the very beginning. And, when people ask me from the outside who want analysis on the Jets, that's the thing that is so interesting about this is, like, usually teams go on heaters like this and you're going to find there's like a high level of like luck that goes into things like this, or bounces going the right way. The Winnipeg Jets just time and time again find a way to get over the top, and when they don't, they correct themselves quickly, which is what we learned in the way that they played against the Florida Panthers the other day. I just wanted to kind of point that out too and say, like, it says something about a team to play this kind of game tonight. That, Ken, you said the word perfectly. It was they put it into cruise control and they went out and they got this game. We don't need to tell anyone out there who watched the Jets for a lot of years and watched the Jets play down to their opponent for years. We don't need to tell any Jets fan that this is, remarkable to see this thing. But even take a look around the league right now. It is what is happening to a lot of the other really good teams in the league. Like the Florida Panthers walked out of Winnipeg and headed on down to Chicago and lost to the Chicago Blackhawks, right? And so now we were talking about the level that the Florida Panthers showed the Winnipeg Jets a week ago last Saturday, and it was a place that the Jets had not been to yet this season, as good as their start had been. And then the Winnipeg Jets went out and elevated, and they got there the very next night. This isn't the Chicago Blackhawks elevating to that level now and knocking off the Florida Panthers. This is the Florida Panthers got up for the Winnipeg Jets, gave them a whooping, got up for them again, and ended up losing that next time, and now just let themselves down, right? Whereas the Winnipeg Jets are handling themselves so much better. We hear it from Scott Arniel about how much it has to do with their core and their leadership. And I want to give you some examples because you brought it up and you talked about Crosby and you talked about Malkin. I take a look at this and you want to see why this team is lost. I saw a lot of instances, Ken, of Malkin and even Crosby being lost. And I'll give two examples for each. And they all ended up in being pretty significant moments of the game. The first goal that the Winnipeg Jets score that just instantaneously puts the Pittsburgh Penguins behind the eight ball is Malkin casually picking the puck off the boards, putting it into the most dangerous spot on the ice, and all of a sudden it's in the back of the net. If you're a player on that team, if you're Brian Rust or if you're Grizzlick or whoever you are, and you're one of the guys whose job is to go out and grind and like hold the fort until those guys go out and score for you and put you in a good spot. And you're watching those guys giving the game away for you. Well, that's a tough one. Then later on, you see that it's the penalty that Malkin takes right at the end of the period. Bad time to take a penalty. Boom. That's the 3-0 goal. The 2-0 goal, Ken, is the Pittsburgh Penguins have 3 guys deep. Sidney Crosby is he's the 4th guy in the zone, and he gets the puck and he takes a shot and misses the net, and it goes all the way out. Now it's an odd man rush for the Winnipeg Jets. This is the details that we're talking about here. This is a detail slip in that he puts the Winnipeg Jets he puts the Winnipeg Jets in a great spot and puts Pittsburgh in a terrible spot for the 2-0 goal. Like, the self-inflicted wounds on this night came from the very best players on the Pittsburgh Penguins. This isn't a night where you go out and you say, wow, the 4th line really let them down or whatever. The best players, the guys who are supposed to be driving the bus right now for the Pittsburgh Penguins, are the ones who let them down. And I'll say this as well, even Crosby, like, take a look at Mark Scheifele last Saturday when he gets in that fight with Ekblad, how fired up he is, how like this is Mark Scheifele getting in that fight looking like he is absolutely just, come on, you guys, let's go. And just look at Sidney Crosby's face after his fight with Kyle Connor. Like, he looks like he is just so dejected and out of it. I know you're sitting on the bench and you're giving stick taps for your captain who went out and fought right now, but I take a look and this is a broken team. It's a broken team because the players that you need to be driving the bus right now have let go of the wheel, and they're wandering up and down the aisles of the bus, not knowing what to do. It's a bad spot to be in. And I'm going to transfer this really quickly to the Pittsburgh Penguins overall and the conversation we had last season. I love the sentimentality of it. I love the idea of people saying Sidney Crosby played his entire career as a Pittsburgh Penguin. If this is the direction that Sidney Crosby's tenure with the Pittsburgh Penguins is going for the next 3 seasons, I don't want to watch it, Ken, because I had said for the first game of the year, it was the first time I'd kind of seen Sidney Crosby a little bit lost out on the ice. It was the first time I'd gone and been like, yeah, that guy's, usually you'd watch him for years, Ken, and night after night, you were like, that guy's one of the best players in the world. He shows it every night. I didn't see it in the first game. I didn't see it in this game. I saw him throw out a couple of hope plays where he just turned the puck over. Sidney Crosby is in danger of probably the most important mark he's going to have in his career, other than where he ends up on the list of Stanley Cup winners, on the list of points that he ends up with. But Sidney Crosby will set a mark if he can be a point per game player at the end of the season that no one in the history of the game has ever done. 19 straight seasons, or would it be 20, Ken?
This is 20th, I think.
If he can end up being a point per game player, the way he's playing right now,
one lost season in there though. Sorry, one lost season with the lockout, so it would be 19. Yeah,
it was hard to watch this. It's hard to watch and see. Like I can't remember if you were there for that one, Ken, but I covered them in the Stanley Cup final in 2006.
Yeah, I wasn't there, but yeah.
And we watched them win their first one in 2010. Like, you are talking about an all-time team, a team that was like one of those mini dynasties, and at their peak were absolutely phenomenal. To watch the Pittsburgh Penguins and all the important parts of that team here now and playing like that, break that up, send them to the 4 different corners of the league and get those guys somewhere where they can play meaningful hockey, because that franchise looks completely and utterly broken to me right now, Ken.
Yeah, I mean, Sid kind of missing the net. That was a rarity too on the goal by Nemesnikov. But man, I mean, Erik Karlsson couldn't even get himself back into the frame, right? I mean, to me, that was a tough goal. I know that he was on the rush and everything else. That whole goal with no back check, no back pressure was tough. Yeah, I mean, the reason I said I feel badly for Sidney Crosby is because this is not how it should end for him. Even though he's playing at an almost a point a game level, I'm sorry. Like, Sidney Crosby should not be playing on a line with Anthony Beauvillier. I'm sorry. No offense to Anthony Beauvillier, but this is not a top line player, Sean. Whatever. I'm not trying to knock. He's a good NHLer, but he's not at the level that Sidney Crosby should have as a line mate. So I know we talked about this a lot last year. I know it's not happening, but man, it would be fun for Sidney Crosby to play on a team. This is a great example. I'm just going to put it this way. I'm not saying Sidney Crosby is thinking this way, but if you're Sidney Crosby and you see the start that the Jets have gotten off to, I know that he wants to be a Penguins lifer, but there's got to be a part of him that thinks, man, it would be fun to play on that other line, play on the first or second line with the Jets and be on a team that's 17-3 trying to chase another trophy, right? But anyways, we know that's not going to happen. But anyways, it's interesting to see where the Jets are at after. And Sparky says I'd have Crosby on the Jets for 4 months. Well, it's not 4 months. He signed a 2-year extension already, so it would be 3 years. And I think that Sidney Crosby could easily play 3 years in that 2C spot, but I don't see that happening. So it's more likely to be a guy who came from Pittsburgh's organization in the Rutger McGroarty trade, Braden Yager, that's going to be in that 2C job, sooner than later, whether that's next year or the year after. But anyways, let's go a little deeper.
Well, here, let's just do this. I'm going to give the Pristine Roofing call to the Pittsburgh Penguins organization and say, wake up and either, I don't know, let it go. Let those guys get out of there. Let Sidney Crosby go somewhere where he can. And I know it's up to Sidney Crosby, and in the end, it's probably that he doesn't want to go there. But there's got to be a wake up, and it can't end that way for one of the greatest careers in the NHL. When like you said, Ken, there's 2 years down the road. So great time to give North End Rick the Pristine Roofing wake up call at 204-981-6289. He's the guy you want down to give you all the information you need for your roofing, siding, and exteriors. You can also call Pristine Roofing themselves at 1-204-237-7663. And hey, I got to tell you something. Thank you so much to the K&R viewers. North End Rick had six estimates this week alone. Last time I went for coffee with him, he was just finishing up doing an estimate for a K&R listener. He had six estimates this week from K&R listeners alone. So thank you so much for
well done, folks.
And, it sure helps let our sponsors know when you let them know that you're there because Kenny and Renny sent you. It sure helps for us. So we really do appreciate that, folks.
Right, like Craig Zamzo picking up another suit at Vittorio Rossi on the way back to his home in the Westman region.
There you go, Westman. Is Westman? He's in north of
even
the
Parkland
region.
Yeah, sorry, more Parkland than Westman.
Kind of north. I think Swan is Swan.
Parkland?
Yeah. I think he's north of Parkland. I don't even know where that I don't even know. He's so far north. I don't even know what you would call that. But hey, Ken, why don't you give
either way? Well done.
While we're at it too.
Yeah, you bet. For folks who have realty needs they'd like to have met, contact our main man, Lou Ferlin at Royal LePage Dynamic Realty, 204-791-9971, or at the office, 204-989-5000. His email is lou@louferlin.ca. That's LOU@LOUFURLAN.ca. Lou Ferlin, excellent realtor, excellent human being, and excellent supporter of the community, including our podcast.
What did you see from the power play tonight? I was almost slightly surprised to see Gabe Vilardi in the bumper position. And then I just remembered that that's the beauty of this power play is everyone plays something a little bit different. Ken, it's funny because all those years we talked about the Jets power play and how static and how stationary it was, and that it was just a step away from being like the structure of it was the same as the Tampa Bay Lightning's, but Tampa built in a little bit of movement and a little bit of a shell game in the middle of the ice there. Well, the Jets aren't doing a shell game. They're doing like outside of Morrissey on the top. They're doing like a 4-man shell game. You never know where these guys are going to end up for the most part. Just what did this open up any more layers for you on just how layered this power play has become?
Yeah, so impressive, and for me, it's the spacing, right? I mean, you see a couple of the the plays on that stretch of game, and they've got the deal where you move the players are moving now, right? You got it almost like a little old Nintendo special where they show how the play develops before the goal. Morrissey kind of sucks the defender to him. Kyle Connor drags 2 people towards him, and again, Sean, I mentioned the other day how subtle a play that Vilardi makes in order to create the lane for Scheifele to get open for the one-timer from Ehlers. This is another great example. This is not Gabe Vilardi standing in the top of the circle, beaver tailing and tapping his stick saying he's open. He subtly moves himself into the high slot, into a position where he can't be checked when the two people get sucked over to Kyle Connor. He opens up his stick in the passing lane and hits it immediately, and it's just absolute thing of beauty. And Sean, I can't help but remember, like, that's a vintage Mark Scheifele goal from when the Jets power play was at its potentest.
Yes.
When you know Wheeler had the three option, the three-headed monster. He had Bufflin at the top. He had Laine with the cross ice sauce, and you also had Scheifele in that high slot position. And given that Sakic kind of release, it's just money. So man, it's just a thing of beauty for sure. We know the Jets power play went through a tough stretch there. I think whatever, it was 1 for 10. So that went from, 45% to mid 30s, which is still excellent. If the Jets can keep it in that 30 range, or even in the mid to high 20s, it's going to be a good year for them with the man advantage, Sean. But to me, having that ability to show multiple threats, that's Davis Payne, getting the old abracadabra wand out right here. This is another way. Oh, you think you can cut? You think you want to shut down Kyle Connor's one timer? Oh, wait. How about Gabe Vilardi in the slot? Oh, how about Ehlers on a one timer from down low? Oh, how about Scheifele in the high slot? So I love it. And like you said, this is vintage Tampa, where you got Kucherov moving around, you got Point moving around. Now they don't have Stamkos, but like it's dangerous now that they have all of those different weapons at their disposal. And to me, that the power play, we know that it's been impressive. It's been impressive to witness, and they will continue to evolve and elevate, I think, based on how those guys are moving the puck around. It's just really impressive to see how they've been snapping them around.
Well, and one thing that's very interesting about it is Mark Scheifele on one night in the very same spot will be the guy who's moving the puck, right? The passing. He's the Blake Wheeler, even though Blake Wheeler played a different spot. Blake Wheeler played the other side of the ice, right? But for the vast majority of this year, Scheifele has more so been the passer, the dealer, right? But then all of a sudden, last game, on one of the most important games of the year, he becomes the trigger man, right? Like, he can do both, and that's why. So usually, what can happen in a power play like that is what made Tampa dangerous for so many years was that Point in the bumper spot was extremely dangerous. Kucherov could shoot the puck, and Stamkos was just an all-timer, right? Like, you're talking about probably the three best we've seen from that spot on the power play in the last 10 years would be Ovi first, Stamkos second, and for, kind of a shooting star moment for 2 or 3 years was Patrick Laine, right? But Patrick Laine was every once in a while, but not, the most often, making that pass for someone else to take the one-timer, right? Like, Mark Scheifele is very capable of finding that lane and making a pass to the bumper and getting it to Nick Ehlers if he's there, or all the way over to Kyle Connor, or back up top, or moving it down to Gabe Vilardi for that quick, power move to the front of the net. But he can also blast it in the back of the net like he's doing. And now we're seeing from Nikolai Ehlers that he didn't know how to play the bumper, but he's pretty darn good at it. And we see how he wheels and deals and passes. And then you see Kyle Connor tonight, the guy who you would typically think has the best shot on the Winnipeg Jets, and the guy who early in the year, we saw him going short side and just didn't look like his shot could be stopped. Well, now all of a sudden, he's the guy who's finding Gabe Vilardi. And Gabe Vilardi, who's usually the guy down low, who's making those great through the not behind the back, but the no look through the legs passes into the middle or across. He's the guy who's getting in front and bearing it in the back. Like, the only thing that this power play is not absolutely 1,000% ticking on, Ken, is Josh Morrissey blasting it from the top of the point and putting it in the back of the net. That's probably the next level side quest for the Jets to unlock there. But really, if you think about it, Mark Scheifele is a phenomenal passer on the power play, and he's a phenomenal trigger man. Gabe Vilardi, phenomenal passer, phenomenal trigger man. Ehlers, passer, trigger man. Connor, passer, trigger man. And through it all, Josh is getting his fingers in there. You basically have you've got a 9 out of 10 on this power play right now, in that every player is basically doing both, except for maybe Morrissey putting the puck in the back of the net. This is a 90% power play. Like, that is the mark you give this. It's a 9 out of 10, and it's been like this all year. It is, to me, just absolutely, I'm starstruck by what the Jets have done from last season to this season, and how they have just unlocked and opened up something that looked like it was locked up. It has paid off the Winnipeg Jets, bringing in Davis Payne to do what he's done here. And if you're looking to pay off high interest credit cards or debt, we suggest you go talk to our friends at Cambrian Credit Union about their payoff loan. They can show you how taking out a loan to pay off your debt actually gets you debt free faster, and you can save thousands of dollars. Go to cambrian.mb.ca to book an appointment online. It would be very interesting, Ken, to talk to Davis Payne and say to him, like clearly it's his plan, right? But it would be very interesting to talk to him and be like, have you ever had anything even close to this? Like, in any other power play that you've created before, have you had these kind of pieces? Like, it really is. I'm wondering if it's just the perfect melding of like someone who is sure looking like a power play mastermind, but someone who also, walked in and saw like all the pieces are there for something amazing, and I know how to unlock that. Like, I'm guessing that it would be very interesting to have heard his job interview with Scott Arniel, because I'm envisioning it being him walking in and being like, you guys are on the precipice of having a ridiculous power play. You just need to do this. You need to do this. You need to do this. And you unlock it. It's probably how he got the job, Ken. That's how I would see it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that probably 20, what was it, 12 or 14? Sorry, this is something I should know off the top of my head. But the 1 year with LA, I would say that he probably had a pretty good looking power play. The year that they beat the Rangers, that is
2012, isn't that?
Sorry, 12. Yeah. 12. So, I mean, Doughty, Kopitar, I mean, they had some good weaponry there. I can't remember if they were a high-end power play, but I mean, that's early in his assistant coaching career. Had some pretty good weapons there. But yeah, I mean, for sure. And again, I had a chance to talk to both those guys in Las Vegas, and you got a sense of where they were coming from. But they've just fit in really well with the staff as a whole, right? So, and their plan has been good. And we'll leave it to Bick. Thanks for coming, Rick, even in the wins. Not just here for the losses. Thanks for coming. Jets PK leaking some serious oil. 5 goals allowed in the last 5 games. PK slipped to 79%, which is 18th. Anyways.
I mean, it's I guess, it's facts.
Sure, I just think that it's nice to look at that when, team 17-3, happy if the Jets' biggest problem is that their PK is in the bottom third or still in the middle of the pack. We appreciate Beck doing his best to find something that he views as a negative. And can it be better? Of course. And I'm just going to go to that quickly. I didn't, Sean, you played some defense. I didn't, but in terms of being a defenseman, but I thought the Jets kind of got caught with 2 defensemen below the goal line. Sandberg was already in the corner. DeMello got caught below the goal line. And then there seemed to be some miscommunication between Kapari kind of checking on the wall, and Appleton was kind of left to his own devices between, Rust and Bunting, which was a tough play. But I think that was more of we talked about the aggressiveness, and the Jets want to be aggressive. I think that was an opportunity. It was one of the examples where they were a little bit too aggressive, and it kind of ended up burning them. But for the most part, the penalty kill has been improved. But the power play is league leading. So, I would say that both special teams coaches overall have done a good job. But of course, penalty kill is an area that Jets can improve. No doubt about that. Hey, let's talk about Kyle Connor quickly before we get into the other stuff. What do you think?
Just before I say that, I just wanted to say my buddy Dwighty always would say this. Bick must keep a jar of sour candies by the computer because he just can't keep that that look off his face. It just has to be the, okay, they've won 17 out of 20 games, but I'll tell you this much. Get the sour candies out, folks. Bic,
Can't believe that
sponsored-
penalty kill.
Bic sponsored by Sour Patch Kids. There, get that man
amazing.
his sponsorship. Yeah, let's get into Kyle Connor. Get at it.
It's funny. I mean, Scott O'Neill is saying that that it's fun to see once in a while, but he doesn't want Kyle Connor fighting. My favorite part of the whole thing is the exchange with Mike McIntyre in the room after by Kyle saying, Kyle is. It's interesting, Sean. We've seen Kyle since he broke into the NHL, and what I like about Kyle is that it's very clear that even though he does not want the spotlight, and you and I have said this before, like there's a world where Kyle Connor is like rocking a KFC t-shirt every single interview he gives with the bucket on it, right? I mean, I understand there'd have to be some trademarking things taken care of, but that's not him. But I love the fact that his voice, he's feeling more comfortable in having a voice. He is part of the leadership core, even though he is still a bit of a quieter guy. He's not afraid to say things publicly. And I love the fact that he said, we're not taking any shit today in the post-game interview with Mike McIntyre. I love that. I mean, it's totally not his personality, but, he landed one good punch on Sidney Crosby and he knocked him down. I mean, nobody had Kyle Connor, Gordie Howe hat trick on the bingo card today. But there's just another example. We've talked about buy-in all of the time, Sean, all year long. Buy-in has been there from the very beginning. The buy-in goes back to Rick Bowness's arrival. But keeping the level of buy-in and constantly elevating the level of buy-in, this is another example. And, you hear Vladislav Nemestikov, who isn't afraid to, muck it up. And, we saw it the other day with Jesper Boquist, when he got the 10-minute misconduct. He's talking about Kyle Connor being feisty. We don't often see the feisty side of Kyle Connor, but we've seen a player who is diligent in terms of the details, like you mentioned. And his back pressure and willingness to back check has been incredible to watch this year. He's embraced his role in the penalty kill. And again, I don't expect to see another fight from Kyle Connor anytime soon, but I commend him for being a willing participant against one of the best players to ever play the game and to not back down. I think that that's important for Kyle Connor. And Scott O'Neill joking that he's trying to get himself some room out there, right? I mean, that all of that there's a little bit of humor tucked in. But I love the willingness to be a little more combative than we're used to seeing Kyle Connor, and good on him for taking that next step.
I wonder if you remember it this way. I'm going to see if the audience can chime in if they remember it this way. I felt like a real turning point for the Winnipeg Jets the first time around. Okay, Ken, like back when they were a team that didn't make the playoffs very often. And I thought a lot of it had to do with getting kind of dragged into it by their players as they came of age. And even then, coming of age was, that their players were older at that time. But I really think, Blake Wheeler was a driver of the Winnipeg Jets, clearly. I'm not saying anything anyone doesn't know, but if you remember a time, it seemed early on from those 2011 to maybe 12, 13, around 14 years, he was just like a really big guy who was stupid fast and had great hands. And it was just like he just wanted to get in. He wanted to get his points. He wanted to do those things. And then all of a sudden there was a turn, Ken. Do you remember there was a year where it started out and he had like 3 fights right at the beginning of the year, right? And one of them was against Robert Bortuzzo when he was still a Pittsburgh Penguin. But even at that time, you had Paul Maurice was saying, well, we don't want him fighting all the time, but we don't mind it. It felt to me like there was a little bit of this I'm done taking flack from people around this league attitude. And it just, to me, was, I'm not saying that the fighting earned him the ice time or did any of those things. It just came with this attitude that Blake Wheeler just didn't care anymore. Nothing was going to stop him. No one was going to intimidate him away from it. No one was going to push him around. No one was going to knock him off the puck. He was going to beat you in every single aspect of the game. And if that meant you and me are going to drop gloves, I'll do that too, right? And I wanted to bring this up on the show the other day, but aren't we kind of seeing that the last couple of years from Mark Scheifele? And what have we seen from Scheifele's game over the last I guess I would put it like this. If you get Blake Wheeler fighting all of a sudden, if you get Mark Scheifele fighting all of a sudden, if you get Kyle Connor fighting and he says what he was just saying there, what I see, Ken, is not guys who are like, oh, I'm going to add fighting to my game and it's going to be important. And it's not the whole thing about like fighting opens up space and all that kind of stuff. To me, it is just a sign of a guy who's willing to do whatever I need to do to walk away and succeed and win this game. And I am I wrong, Ken, to think that Blake Wheeler went through that metamorphosis and it took him to another level and it brought us the very best that we ever saw of Blake Wheeler in his career. And now I think we are seeing the best version that we've ever seen of Mark Scheifele as he starts doing the kind of things that he did against Ekblad or when he fought Kachuk last year. And I believe he stepped in last year one time and fought for a bad hit on Ehlers. And then now you get Kyle Connor, a former Lady Bing winner, who's going to go out and be like, yeah, fine, let's do this. And then talk about it after the game like that. Like, am I wrong to think that what we're seeing is that I may read too much into the fighting, but what I read is these are guys who you would never think of fighting, and yet they're doing it because they don't see, hey, I want to add being a pugilist to my game. I just want to add, I will do whatever the hell it takes to win to my game.
Yeah, and we've talked about this, and it's one of our friend Jeff Hamilton's best favorite lines, right? If you don't like the narrative, do something to change it, right? So, I mean, this is something that you talked about at the preseason, Sean, about this group. They probably should have had to have learned some of those hard lessons earlier on in the career. But to me, man, you're seeing more layers and layers in terms of their overall game. And this is another great example. And I think you hit the nail on the head perfectly. The willingness to do whatever it takes. That's what you need when it comes to playoff time. So again, am I saying that Kyle Connor is going to be fighting in round 2 or 3 if the Jets happen to make it that far? This is not what I'm saying. I'm not saying this is Jarome Iginla fighting the other team's captain in the playoffs in 4 consecutive rounds, like in 2004. What I am saying, though, is what you're saying. These guys are willing to do what it takes in order to take the next step in their careers. And that's something that if you're Scott Arniel, if you are Kevin Cheveldayoff, if you're any member of the Winnipeg Jets, you're saying right on when you see that happening, right? Is there a risk? I mean, is there a risk that the guy gets, injured? And let's go to there, Sean, as we change the gears here. Staying on this topic, Vilardi taking the majority of the draws. Do you think it has something to do with the fight? I mean, Mark Scheifele's hand didn't look sore against the Panthers when he racked up a hat trick, but we know he also had a day of maintenance the day after having the hat trick. Do you think somehow it's related to his hand that Vilardi was taking the draws? And again, I watched the video. I know I sent you the audio. I don't know if you saw Scott Arniel's face when Mike McIntyre asked him, is Mark okay? Otherwise, all right, then. There was definitely a pregnant pause that I don't think was planned. That leads me to believe that, yes, Mark Scheifele is dealing with something, whether it's his hand or something else. Yes, Gabriel Vilardi did a great job in the circle today. There's no doubt about that. 75%, you'll take that any time. But it's certainly not coincidental that he happened to take more faceoffs in the last 2 games.
I don't know. These are things that, like, whatever I would say, it would be a guess at this stage, right? So I think one of those things is right now. I'll chalk it up to the Winnipeg Jets are doing whatever they feel it takes to win right now. Mark Scheifele feels, for whatever reason, that they're better off with Gabe Vilardi taking those draws. Gabe Vilardi is doing a good job with it. So I honestly, I don't know. I'll let you handle it if you want to add more to it. To me, I just don't feel like I would add anything of value to it. So I think we can move on to other things.
Yeah, all good. No, I just was wondering. I mean, I just thought that the reaction, it's more the reaction by Arniel than anything that was done or said on the ice.
Yeah. Okay. People are talking about the reverse hit. I'll go here before we go anywhere else. But first, I just wanted to say this. SK says KFC is greater than Gordie Howe, the new legend. This is just sacrilege. This is out and out a cold take of all cold takes. You're talking about one of the greatest of all time, the leading all-time goal scorer. Let's be honest, Kyle Connor is not going to end up anywhere near the points that Gordie Howe ended up with, and Gordie Howe is also one of the toughest hockey players to ever play the game. This is sacrilege. Hey, I know you love your team, but come on, give your head a shake. And you could give your head a shake in my Arctic Spas hot tub because there's no such thing as a cold take in an Arctic Spas hot tub. You need to get here right now. My Arctic Spa, of course, comes with the Spa Boy package. So if you are looking for the kind of hot tub that does everything just shy of Kenny's hot tub time machine, go down and see my guy Dustin over at Arctic Spas. Make sure you tell him Kenny and Renny sent you, just like you've been doing for everything else. Again, kind of blown away. We've been getting reached out to by our sponsors, and we just are so happy with how everyone's responding. Okay, let's get into the reverse hit thing. I'll just jump in quick, Ken. I'll try and I don't have a problem with reverse hits. I don't, and I kind of never really have. And I've been on the receiving end of a lot of reverse hits before. It's kind of a way to, and maybe this is an antiquated thought for me, because back in the time that you and I were playing hockey, if you were a star, it was just a license to deliver abuse. I talked about this with Pat Rathwell all the time, who was a ref back in those days. He talked about how I got penalties all the time. And I said, well, I played in front of the net and I scored a lot of goals, and I would get literally like speared in the nuts and cross-checked in the back and slashed on the hands over and over again. And after a while, you just get sick of it. So you end up getting in a fight to let the guy know, if you're going to slash me, I'm going to punch you in the face. We'll see how that's going to feel. Or I'd stick a guy back, or I'd do whatever. It's called carving out your own space. But Pat would talk about how I would always be like ending up in the penalty box. And then I was like, well, you guys won't protect me out there. So I've got to find a way to protect myself. So why I'm talking about this being antiquated is, for a long time, what you would see from star players is the reverse hit was a way to kind of carve some space out for yourself when you were a player who got slashed 17 times a game and speared and stuck and cross-checked, and everyone would run you every time opportunity you got. That was a way to carve out some space. Now, I know it's a little bit different of a game, but I still don't mind the idea that if you've got the puck, someone is coming in to hit you and you're carving out a little bit of space there. So it's one of these things that I think, whose fault is it, right? Now I've been on record of saying this before. If it's a direct headshot, I think it's a headshot. I think it should be penalized. If it's a really severe one, then I think you should be suspended, because we need to take headshots out of the game. But if you are throwing reverse hits and it's typically someone with the puck quite often, and you are defending yourself against someone who's trying to come and, smoke you through the board. Put it this way. Let's take a look at a guy like Kaprizov, who came into Winnipeg and has been taken out twice by Winnipeg Jets players. And one of those situations was the reverse hit. If you remember that, it was who had he thrown the reverse hit on right before the Dylan situation? Anyways, he'd thrown a reverse hit on someone. I can't remember who it was, but why do you think he's doing it, folks? He's taking a beating every time he comes to Winnipeg, and he's trying to get a measure of retribution. He's trying to carve out some space from. I've got no problem with stars in the NHL who we are there to watch carving out a little bit of space for themselves. That's my take on it. That with the caveat that if you do a reverse hit and it's a headshot, that you pay the time for the crime and you get suspended if it's a clear-cut headshot.
Yeah, I mean, the reverse hit is interesting. I mean, people are asking, and do I think there are some times when it should be called interference? Sure. But I'm all for battles for the puck. But again, sometimes if you catch a person by surprise, I understand why they get sour about it too. So, I think you pretty much covered it, but it makes me think of I love the Zach Whitecloud hit, and it's got nothing to do with who's playing for who or what team or whatever. Sometimes you got to have your head up. I feel badly that Matthew Nyes is hurt and ended up on IR. I love the way that he plays the game. I loved watching him when he was on a line with Chaz Lucius at the University of Minnesota when I went and watched them at UND. But I think there is a responsibility. You better have your head up and you better be aware of who's on the ice. And I'm not saying that Sidney Crosby doesn't need to be aware of Kyle Connor throwing a big hit against him. But, sometimes things had happened that you don't expect, I guess. But game has changed a lot. And, I just want to say this quickly too. There was a time, Sean, when you and I played, which you're referencing, that the Ryan Reeves hit on Darnell Nurse wasn't an illegal hit at one
Yeah.
time. That used to
We,
be
we, we
acceptable
would have talked
behavior.
about what a great hit. Hey,
Exactly.
it would have been on
Nurse's
Rock'em Sock'em Hockey.
Nurse's head is down. I didn't love that about him. He put himself in a vulnerable position, but now the onus is on the hitter to make contact with the body as well. So, anyways, it's a different time, but again, I also don't think that it's as dirty a play as some do, and I understand why he got a suspension and everything else. And I'm not trying to sound like a Neanderthal, but the game is evolving, so there's going to be an evolution when it comes to reverse hits. Also, the bigger issue for me, Sean, and what people have been talking about all week on various networks and channels and everything else, and you and I knew this playing also. You need to be aware on the ice. There's too many players running around in the NHL that think it's summer hockey. You have to be aware and be ready to be hit. That's just as simple as it gets for me. It's still a contact sport, and the contact is part of what makes it great. And I'm not saying you should be going for headshots and everything else. You shouldn't. You need to be hitting on the body, but at the same time, be aware out there. It would be something that's a fairly mundane, or something that seems pretty elementary to me.
Yeah, and see, the list says I don't care if they're good or bad. It's just odd that with the definition of interference, it's not called out on a technicality. I think if the players got the puck and they hit them, you're engaging the player with the puck, which means it's kind of like one of those, if you're holding an electrical wire and you grab somebody else, they're now part of the electricity. If you're holding the puck and you're making contact with someone who's coming to get the puck, I don't see that as being interference. I see that as being part of the main play on the ice. Interference is when you're taking care of someone away from the play. The play is there. That's my take on the whole interference thing. Anyway, Ken, we got to get moving here. Johnson,
sure.
Got you covered. Play of the game. What do you got?
Neil Pionk blocking the sliding pass from Malkin backdoor during that power play when it was 3-1. So that to me was an easy one to pick out.
Neil Pionk is just finding his way into like your eye every single night. Like what a season he is having. I've always thought guys would squeeze the stick too much in contract years, but holy smokes, is he ever showing out well? Anyways, that's the Johnson Group got you covered play of the game. And hey, do you run a small business in Canada? Look to Canada's #1 employee benefits plan, Chambers Plan, to give you a competitive edge. Chambers Plan is the simple, stable, smart choice for over 30,000 businesses countrywide. Visit chamberplan.ca to learn more. Neil Pionk with the Kenny and Renny OGs Johnson Group got you covered play of the game, which brings us to the keg save of the game. What do you got, Ken?
Yeah, Hellebuck on Ricard Raquel. Probably his toughest save of the night. Second period save, I believe. Was a turnover by Scheifele. Raquel walked in, had a good shot, but Hellebuck stood tall and made the save. And again, sorry, honorable mention also, Jarry on Kyle Connor in the first 5 minutes. Like this is not a Kyle Connor miss, Sean. And I do think it was more it hit Jarry. I'm not taking anything away from him, but to me it seemed like his pad just happened to be standing there. It wasn't that he extended his pad and made this ridiculous save. Otherwise, I would have probably given him the save because it was an all-world shot. I mean, would Kyle have liked to get it a little bit higher? Sure. But he hammered the one-timer, and Jarry happened to get his leg out there and made the save.
Yeah, I'm going to give it to Hellebuck on that early power play in the first period with the Penguins and the save he makes when the puck makes its way over to Malkin all alone in front of the net. I believe it's a blocker save. I just think that's one of those ones that I think the Jets were winning this game either way, but I think what happened in this situation here is Malkin already gives away the puck. It's already 1-0. Then he gets this opportunity and he's thinking, okay, well, I can make up for it. A lot of times players like Malkin are the players who are like, okay, I gave one away, I'm going to go get one back. He kept them from getting it back. And I just think that kept Malkin kind of controlled in this game and taking one of those guys. All hands on deck for the Pittsburgh Penguins right now if they're going to succeed. So if you can take one of their all-time players out the way that I think Connor Hellebuck did there, that for me earns the hashtag the keg save of the game. But it doesn't matter what I think or Ken thinks, matters what you think. Share with us your hashtag the keg save of the game. You're automatically entered to win a $50 gift certificate usable at any of the 3 fine keg locations here in the city of Winnipeg. Each location finer than the last. And the winner from our last show is Snackatoba, who I saw in here earlier. Snackatoba, you know what to do. Direct message me at SN Sean Reynolds. Send me your full name, send me an email, and I will have the fine folks at the keg send you a $50 gift certificate usable at any of the 3 fine keg locations here in the city of Winnipeg. Each location finer than the last. And quickly, Ken, your TCB lamplighter of the game.
Yeah, I'm tempted to go Nemesnikov just because it was a great indication of the state of the Penguins. But for me, it's got to be the power play goal by Velarde. Just the setup from Morrissey to Connor to find Velarde roof daddy. To me, that's my lamplighter. Even though there were multiple selections.
I'm there too. Doesn't matter what Ken and I think, though. Share with us your TCB lamplighter. Automatically entered to win a frosty, delicious 8-pack of Lamplighter Amber Ale, brought to you by our friends at TransCanada Brewing Company. If you can't wait for Kenny and Renny to gift you your 8-pack, head on down to TransCanada Brewing Company, 11290 Kenniston. Join them in their tap room. Great pizza, great beer, great atmosphere, great folks. They got it all down there. And the winner of our lamplighter from the last show, that would be Carson Courtvriend. Carson Courtvriend. You know what to do. Direct message me at SN Sean Reynolds. Send me your full name. Send me an email, and I will have the fine folks at TCB send you a voucher for a frosty, delicious 8-pack of Lamplighter Amber Ale. It is the nectar of the gods. Ken, anything to say before we go?
Yeah, I had a great lunch at TCB yesterday. Right now, their November promo is 50 cents off Flying Otter 8-packs, I believe. That's just for the last stretch here to finish off November.
Tasty. Good stuff. Okay, well, I will say this. They, being one of our sponsors, you know what they do. They fight to keep the conversation going in this space. So we would appreciate it if you would appreciate by showing some love for our sponsors who also fight to keep the conversation going in this space. That would be Vittorio Rossi, Pristine Roofing, Cambrian Credit Union, Sweet Lou Furlan, Arctic Spas, the Johnston Group, the Keg, and once again, TransCanada Brewing Company. Thank you to them. Thank you to you, Ken. Great job on this.
Have a great big night. For the national media, folks, tune in.
Yes, it's going to be a good one. And like I said, it's someone said the white boss hog suit. I'll give you a hint. It's not far off. But yes, I'm going to be showing out in the Vittorio Rossi threads tomorrow. So have a look for that, folks.
One last one. Sorry, I know we don't talk a lot about TV, but caught the Elvis Netflix special this afternoon here. Absolutely tremendous. Return of the King. Anyone who is a fan of music should check that out as well.
Excellent stuff. Okay, thanks. Great to see everybody. We will see you again tomorrow in this very same space when we reconvene and do it all over again. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.